Hey, good evening, Galleon. Sorry for being a few minutes late, and I thank you for, if you're watching live, for sticking around for a few minutes. Week ago, uh, I'd intended to talk about the parade. I'm going to start there. And last week, this is a two-person show, so when one of us is sick, not me last week, we kind of crap out. So that was the reason for not being here. There's no good explanation. I'll tell you if I see you around town why I'm a few minutes late. But, anyways, nothing too exciting. What I wanted to say was back on the 4th, it's 10 days ago now, I guess, is had the Come Home to Galleon. And, and learned a bunch of stuff as you usually do. It's kind of fun from the point of view of walking through the parade to talk to different people who are participating and thanking them for being part of it. It's also a reminder of how the same people seem to be responsible for all the good things that happen around town. So I saw Matt Eckleberry. In fact, I was talking with Director of Law Palmer. He said he was in about 20 different places that day. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but Thomas is on to something. And then Sarah Capretta, who I think a lot of people who enjoy the pickle run associate her with that. She was down there making sure the parade came off, and pretty interesting thing. One of my surprises was that was ended up being a particularly busy day for the fire department and the EMS. So my usual ride to jump in the fire truck and ride along like a big kid got shot down. But I had a chance to ride with the one of the police vehicles in the parade, and was staffed that day by one of our new officers. So it was interesting to talk to him. It's funny how I think lifelong residents, it's true of any town, but it seems like the people who are the hardest on Galleon are, are the natives, and I might be part of that crowd. But anyways, this guy from the area, so he was experienced with the police force in his hometown, and it was fun to listen and talk with him about his perceptions of Galleon, and so that was a valuable experience. The other thing that was more gratifying, quite honestly, is the reception that he received. Um, I don't know. I made an exaggeration to say dozens, but let's say 5, 6, 7 people along that short parade route said thank you for your service. Thought that was pretty remarkable, given a lot of the things that are going on with other places and the controversy. That heck, you're only a moment away, a terrible point in time to have your police force go from hero to heel. But just how people feel about our police force is pretty gratifying. So I think it speaks to both the retiring chief, soon to be auditor, and also to the continuity, let's say, it's been achieved there. So it was a good trip for me. I don't know if this is a funny joke or not, but the first couple of times said thank you for your service. I thought, oh my God, I'm vain enough or whatever. I thought, oh, they're talking to me. And I realized, man, they're not talking to me. They're talking to the police officer. So that was a good experience. So even though the EMS wasn't able to be my regular ride through the parade route, it was cool to ride in the very back of the parade, and great crowd, a lot of other stuff going on. I was the last thing I'll get off of Come Home to Galleon, but I was the backup singer. The person, you ever wonder if the person that sang the national anthem didn't show up, what they would do? So while I didn't have to sing, I was called upon to turn on the Christmas tree lights, and so that was a pretty neat experience. I could have probably been sitting on the couch being an old fart, but I was really a good experience, and just points out how however many times you've done something like the Christmas parade in Galleon or whatever the case may be, there's always some fun to be had. And so, although it's been 10 days, I wanted to mention that and then get on with the show. So much has happened since we last broadcast, I would say, or live stream, whatever the right term is. From the perspective of the mayor's office, it's a lot more of the same in that we've been trying to work to put together a 2022 budget. I think there'll be an important discussion and vote tomorrow. I can't say for sure that this second reading for the annual appropriation will, it'll be passed tomorrow. To be that would be a hopeful look at it. There may have to be an emergency meeting or a special meeting. I really don't want to go to the 28th of the month, which is this would be the second scheduled meeting for council to pass that. There's reasons way more boring than the worst cooking show you've ever seen for that, but the timing of it as it relates to getting our budget approved by the County Budget Commission, something called our Certificate of Resources, getting that drafted, passed, and submitted. If we wait to the 28th, it'll make not a real time compressed process even more difficult. So tomorrow night, I think that's one of the big issues. I also would say that this maybe a little corny, but as late this afternoon, hopefully not tomorrow, we're trying to go through the 2021 appropriation and make some corrections. There's literally a handful of areas where spending in one area it exceeds what was in the budget, and we'll have to ask council to make some transfers there. I could list them, but they're not real interesting. They range from storm sewer to the before mentioned police department, and in more cases than not, I think there are 4 of these departments. It's a matter of moving money that was appropriated for overtime or some other personnel category and moving it into regular pay, or I think actually it's more where overtime in a couple of departments has run ahead of what had been budgeted a year ago. So there'll be a couple more of those. I thought we had them taken care of, ironed out at last meeting, but there'll be a couple more, handful of those, in addition to the discussion of the overall 22 budget. So, those are some of that's really what we've been working on. It's not that other things haven't been going on, and there may be some questions about the 598 project and some other things that are on people's mind, but probably the only other piece of information to report that might be new, and we'll see if there are any questions, is State Issue 1, which is the Ohio Public Works Commission. I think we were as a group voting to approve projects, I want to say round 37. So that's been going on for 37 years. I'm slightly older than that process, but I do remember in those years as a county commissioner when those funds were made available through the Public Works. Way back then it was Issue 2, as we've renewed it as voters. And really what it does is allow the state to incur debt to provide money for public works projects throughout the state. And it's a bunch to it, but it was 37 years later. We're still benefiting from that program. This year, it's a combination of a grant and a 0% interest loan, and it has to do with constructing. We've talked a little bit about it, but a stormwater project that will serve the First Avenue area, and as time goes on, we hope to be able to add to that as we're going to build a major outlet and then connect the first part of it. So that's that project. Matt, you have to remind me to check to see if we got a call from the Richland Planning Commission to see if there may be a little bit more of that zero interest money that we could add to that. I believe the project's about $660,000, that stormwater project. There's $185,000 from a grant, $200,000 from a loan, and the rest of that would be made up from stormwater assessments. Not particularly popular subject to bring up, so I'll just skate past that. But anyways, that's I think a lot of what you would see when you look closely at the capital projects that have been funded out of the stormwater fund, it has been that combination of money in the fund, state grant money, and then pretty favorable interest on loan money that allows us to pull off those projects. Pull off's the wrong verb, but fund those projects. So, anyways, that was seems to me a week ago Friday that was approved. The successful project continues to be, and I'll stop, take a breath after this, is Village of Crestline continues to, I think, to be putting together a lot of the funding that they'll need to have a new wastewater treatment plant. So, I wish them well. In a certain sense, we're competing for the same money, but at the same time, that's probably really not the case. So, with that, all that being said, I'll take a breath and see if there's anything.
Yeah.
What you got?
Jumping back to community events for a moment, Samantha just pointed out that the Galion Community Chorus sang Handel's Messiah on the same day as Come Home to Galion, and that should air on the local radio stations on Christmas Day. Then I had a question from Derek. He asked, is the baseball field at East Park getting a new scoreboard?
Oh, no, not in the current plan. But that's an interesting question, Derek. Here's the political answer, if you will. There were $90,000 that were allocated out of freeze funds to make those renovations at East Park. Our best guess is, in part, for a couple of reasons, mostly because of the combination of private labor and the willingness to have volunteers play a large part in the actual sweat equity, if you will, for that project. I think that what was allocated is far more than what's been budgeted. That doesn't happen very often. And so maybe a better way to answer that question is to see, is A, no, it wasn't in the project. B, I'm thinking now of the last time a baseball scoreboard was built, and that is down at the Little League field in Heisey Park, and if you go down there, you'll see that was a three-way partnership, as I recall. A little bit of freeze money, although I could be wrong, taking credit for something we didn't do. I believe it was, and then money from a couple of businesses. So, Derek, that's probably a better, more complete answer is, I hadn't thought of it. We haven't priced a scoreboard in a while, meaning 6 or 7 years, 5 or 6 years. So, good thought. And so, I think as the weather changes, that project's progress, if you will, is probably going to slow down, and it's certainly important to sort of take account of that. So if Derek is associated with the group that is spearheading that, beyond getting in touch with us here on a Monday, another smart idea at least would be to touch base with them if you're not part of that group and say, hey, if we're going to spend money doing A through I don't want to say Z, but let's say A through M in terms of the list of projects, then where's the scoreboard? So, all right, over answer. First over answer in about a month. Well, you got anything there?
Yeah, I do have a question from Mark. He asked, what is the current stormwater assessment for commercial properties such as open parking lots and factory grounds?
What is the multiplier, or what is the factor?
For stormwater, yes.
Yeah, I don't know that off the top of my head. One of the things that we looked at, and again, this has been a few years, in 2014, when we lowered water and sewer rates in conjunction with bumping electric rates. At that time, there was a thought to move to reducing stormwater rates, and it just didn't get going. There's a couple of areas. One that maybe that question is getting at in terms of lack of fairness or equity. If you have a parking lot, whether it's gravel or paved, the way the ordinance is set up, we assess you for the same amount of money. And I think, although I've had this discussion with the city engineer, it's been a while, but the notion that a semi-permeable gravel parking lot causes nearly as much runoff as a paved lot. So I don't know that formula. I'm not sure I believe that. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that parking areas and rooftops of buildings, commercial buildings, are taxed the same. And I think that's been something that people have pointed out. We've asked on a few occasions individual property owners who believe their stormwater assessment's too high to bring that to council's attention and begin a discussion about whether or not, and it largely is over this issue of a paved lot over a gravel lot. So that's one thing I would say about it. We can post it. Matt's pretty good about getting that up. We'll get the rate at which, I believe the question is commercial property at what rate there. And kind of get that back. Was there a second part to that? I get all wrapped up in the...
No.
Well, I'm not opposed to lowering the assessment, but it has been a dependable, meaning the assessment on stormwater, it's been a pretty dependable source to be able to fund projects like I had talked about a few minutes ago. And if you live in a part of town that has a good stormwater system, it's not, tied in or backs into the sanitary system. So when we have a pretty bad weekend in terms of rain, you don't have that in your basement. Really one of the main ways that we can continue to go about that is to continue to fund these projects. So it's worth the new council taking a look at those rates, that issue in particular. The other one I'd want to say is that on the residential side, this applies to, I'll probably goof this up when I say maybe a couple dozen properties, but if you're an account holder, you have an electric account, water account, we're going to assess you the $6 a month, even though you may be in an apartment building where there are multiple folks that are under one roof structure. So if you talk to some of the people that own property and rent property uptown, they'll point out to you that there's a double assessment, if you will, on that. But the issue that was raised about parking lots and this issue of when you have, and I suppose it may come up. We'll take a look at it on the new apartments, the Giltz apartments. You got 2 or 3 levels there. Are we assessing them per account or per square foot on that commercial property? If we keep being an understanding supporter of the completion of that project. And to anticipate a question, is anything going to happen there? We hope sooner than later, but I'm not sure how much of it is supply chain issues, how much of it is COVID. I suppose at a certain level it doesn't really matter if they're wrapped up. What we're interested in is assessing the business, the developer, getting the assistance that was already committed by council into the ground, so we literally see some progress there. But those two issues, back to the original question about stormwater, it's the multiple floor residential buildings, and it's these commercial parking lots. So did Mark have a follow up or anything on that?
No, he just said thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, we'll get you the numbers. How you multiply that square footage by. I think that's how it's factored. So, all right, what else we got?
Next question tonight came from Cindy. She asked, do you know when the concrete will be cleared away where the Pico 2 building used to be?
Yeah, I think it's, we're not real close on that in terms of knowing what's going to happen next. But this is what I can tell you, that the materials for the spec building have been ordered, and there is a multiple month delay in getting those materials on site. So that's real encouraging. That was the whole purpose of getting that building out of the way for many years now, getting the site acquired originally from GE, and then getting, in this case, the private developer to tear down that what turned out to be an obsolete building and get going. As you can tell, however, Cindy, this is a pretty elaborate's not the right word, because all they got a big conveyor, and they're crushing stone, but you can see that they're salvaging that for reuse, and so that's taken a little bit longer. They're certainly maximizing the value of that building, and therefore, there's a trade-off of how much it costs to tear it down, haul it away, and how much you can, if you will, mine by reusing it. And I think that's their plan. So, and again, I'm not privy to their work schedule, but what I do know is by the middle of next year, materials will be arriving on site for the new building, and in advance of that, there'll be the city and the developer doing utility work to get electric and water, sewer. Natural gas will be somebody else's headache, but we intend to be able to provide electric to the site. So anyways, that's what I got on that. I think I answered her question. Yeah, good news. What else you got?
Okay, next question tonight came from Tina. She asked, when are you going to get out to Pounder Avenue to get the east side of the alley fixed behind the houses? Our backyard's flooded again.
Yeah, that was brutal. I don't know. It's one of the issues. I'm going to answer the question. We'll go out there and look. But what we've had when it's been asked before, it's kind of like, again, is that alley on the south side of Pounder, where I believe we're talking about, then this is just a little bit east of Pounder, but in that alley adjacent to it, that was abandoned. And best of our records, we didn't retain an easement to go in there. And so I'm not a huge fan of, and we don't actively promote this, but I think council looks at them when the requests come. So what happens when one set of owners agrees to vacate public access, and the new owners come in and are stuck with what they see as a problem. So it is the best of my knowledge, that is private property. And the other thing I'd said before is the project I was just talking about in the stormwater, that is heading towards Pounder, heading east, and trying to pick up that low spot, which is East Park, in the area that she's talking about. So man, if I'm wrong, we'll take a look at it. But my recollection is that that's what used to be an alley there has been abandoned, and it's and that's why we haven't been out there. But that's so. But what was the name? I'm so sorry.
Tina.
Tina, you're right. We haven't fixed that problem. So I'm well aware of it. I don't know. And I'm not sure this person that brought it up the last time we had a 3-inch flood or not. But you're right, we haven't fixed it. You know what's really so every spot in town that we have, if you will, these chronic drainage problems, we heard about them, we're made aware of them over the weekend. If I'm wrong on this, Tina, follow up. We'll take a look at it again tomorrow. But and what I'd said in relation to these other stormwater projects is we would fix that as we moved east. Turns out that may be it may be a few years. So a short-term fix may be in order. So if we could, I guess what I'm saying, we could get access onto that private property, then we should look at putting in a pipe and a catch basin and catch it and run it to whatever the existing stormwater. I'm not sure where it is. I suspect it's out on Harding Way. So, all right, she follow up?
Yeah, she just
Okay.
mentioned it needs a whole new tile put in.
Yeah, I know. And so, like, damn it, when they abandon it, that does probably need a whole new tile. And what I'm saying, it's different than the project we had with the common sanitary sewer. I'm slouching, I'm sorry. The common sanitary sewer that happened on South Union. I mean, it's the same in that it's a private sewer. In that case, it's a private sanitary sewer. But I think what happened is previous owners asked to have that abandoned, and you could argue, I don't want to argue, but you could argue that that became your pipe. Okay, I don't want to do it that way, but we'll have to have your permission and the other neighbors' permission to get on the place, put a catch basin, and run it north. Yeah, north. I think, and tie into Harding Way. So it's just more work for our legal department, our one-person legal department. But I think what we'll probably have to do is have some paperwork drafted to allow us to access that and allow us to put in or repair what used to be a public sewer. I think it was abandoned, but all right.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor.
It's a long, thin, skinny limb we'll crawl out on, but I think it's going to be a few years before we get that far east in this overall building of rebuilding of the stormwater system. So, see if I'm off on that, it's on me, and we'll correct the record. But I think that's the circumstance, and so we'll see if we can get the paperwork done and have access to your property. We'll tackle it. It's about a block, or it's about the length of Pounder, but it's a little bit over. It won't be inexpensive to get on there, and Tina, you would know if you're in that alleyway, if somebody has a shed or something that they put in there in that abandoned right of way, that could be a complicating factor. But if it's a straight shot through there, I'll pile up some work for our service department yet this winter, and certainly next spring.
Okay. Next question tonight came from Ray. He asked, "What is the status of extending water and sewer lines on Brant Road, Beardsley, and Haymond?"
Yeah, I'm assuming, Ray, that you live out there. A little push or a little pull, whichever you want to be responsible for, to get some citizen interest. Heck, I made some initial inquiries. I wouldn't even call it contact. You know, sometimes says, "Well, I called them and they never got back." We reached out to the township trustees, kind of lamely, honestly. We weren't real persistent, based on a request for water. Oh God, I want to say 90 days ago, maybe not quite that long. And your neighbor out there, we expected her to come to a council meeting, and she wasn't able to make it or hasn't come yet. And she was inquiring about what it would cost to bring water to her property. Her well had gone bad, I think, as I recall the story. And, you know, my reaction to your question, Ray, and to her inquiry is we need a critical mass to make that a project worth putting together the funding. From my perspective, I don't think, you know, I wouldn't require annexing. I think that's kind of the issue when you have an older subdivision that has wells and septic systems. There's at the jurisdictional level, there's well, we don't want to lose that. We don't want that to annex, and the city sits there with the utilities. Hell, we need to sell more water and accept more sewer to charge you for it, and we step back or stand back often. Not we, the city of Galion, but oftentimes the municipality crosses their arms and said, "Well, annex, and then we'll get you water or sewer." That's not where I'm coming from. I don't think that's really where the city of Galion's coming from to require annexation. So back to Ray's question, out there, I think a handful of citizens that would approach, probably privately, if you know your township trustees, and ask them about it, see what their reaction is. Certainly on the water side, we could lay pipe out there. My Lord, we have really large looped lines out that far north. We could use some customers out there. Sewer, you know, you'd have to look at the elevations, quite honestly. You might be able to access that part of the Galion community. They're all our zip codes. Hell, half of them have Galion Electric. It's kind of a hodgepodge of who provides the utilities. But in any case, you know, there might be a lift station involved, which would increase the cost to any project to bring sewer into the city system, and but it's definitely worth looking at. And once again, on the sewer side, I don't have a lot of experience on this, so I don't want to act like Mr. Know-It-All, but with a subdivision like that, once you know there's a tendency for the septic systems to kind of all fail at once. And so what I've thought for a year or two, or a little while at least, is until one of them starts to fail and others start to fail, there won't be a neighborhood awareness that, hey, we got to do something. And so I think that's a complete but not an over answer to his question. I'd approach the trustees if you know them. Other thing is, if you live out there, you're likely to know a council member or two. When you see them, give them a shout. Let them know, you know, that now may be the time to do something to bring water, Galion sewer, to that neighborhood. Fair enough.
Yep. His was the last question I had tonight.
Oh, boo, yes. Well, let me finish up with a couple of things to look out for this week or to be aware of this week. As I said when I at the opening, that we're going to have an important council meeting. It has been a particular challenge. I don't think anyone would dispute this. Maybe it should be that way, but this year's proposed budget has been developed largely by myself and Service Director Ward. So we've taken on tasks that in previous years have been handled by the city auditor's office, and so Brian Satterfield's been doing a real good job of keeping the lights on, keeping the bills paying, and getting us caught up, so that I think in that situation we've slid over and took on some of the things that Brian Trish had previously done in the budget, and so it's I expect there to be some tweaks even tomorrow night. What you find from year to year, every year, is that what you think in November and December of, in this case, 21, it's often a lot can change between now and November, December of 22. So it's, while you use that as a spending plan, I wouldn't expect it to be every single assumption made, every single estimate of expense. A tough part this year is going to be estimating revenue for my office, for our office, because that's been done by the auditor in past years. So I think there's with Auditor-elect Satterfield, I think there's a good balance being developed there, and I'm hopeful that we can get the appropriation done and then work to get the certificate of resources developed with the county auditor. Get that over there. I think the key is this will get everyone's attention. We can't spend any money in 22 until the budget commission, county budget commission, approves our estimate of our resources, our revenues. Has to be approved before we can start spending. So there'll be a fair amount of pressure on that as we finish up everything to get this budget passed. So, anyways, anything else?
Just a question from Keith. He asked
Yeah.
if Pounder Avenue got paved this summer.
Yep, it did. It did. And where we're talking about is not like right under Pounder. Unless I'm really off, it's kind of to the east of that. So anyways, hey, before I leave, it's been a couple, I want to be the, not the last to mention, but among the people to mention how much the changing of the guard at the YMCA is both a situation to be optimistic about the future, because from what I understand, the board, in fact, I know the board has appointed a CEO who's a Galion native, understands the YMCA for many years now, not that many, but a few years now. And then it's the passing of the guard with Terry Gribble. I don't know anyone who is, well, that's not true. I know few people who have spent 33 years in any position and over that time have maintained a level of effort, I think, and I'd say excellence in performance, although some people might groan and say that's hyperbolic. You just ask yourself, how many individuals do you know that have kept up that level of effort for 3 decades and a few years? It's pretty remarkable, and set a high standard. But I think it's neat. I've got to be part of recognizing him, and I think that was a good feeling. We're actually planning, not that anyone's jumping the gun on 2022 freeze projects, but there's project in the conceptual stage, in the works, you might say, to renovate, rebuild, which the playground area behind the YMCA where their daycare center kids have outdoor recreation, in conjunction with a suitable pickleball court. We tried to put sort of a test facility at down at South Park. I got to be honest, it wasn't our department leaked it up, but it just didn't take off. So we're in conversations with them about putting something. All this would be north of the football field and kind of, I guess, what would be west of the YMCA. So those people who are sitting on a freeze project, I suppose that's there's another big one not a big one, but a nice one in the works. So while Terry's retired, I think he's going to help guide that request and develop that in an interim role. I'd kind of like to see him help the city in our park and recreation department, but I think live streaming's not probably the best way to develop an offer for a position by a contract or otherwise. But I did want to mention that before too much time had passed, and recognize Terry's contribution. It's a good thing, and the city's depends on the YMCA to help us with our splash park and with our swimming pool. So those are important working partnerships. Want to maintain those. So any other questions as I've gone on for a minute or two?
That is all I have.
All right, football fans, all 10 of you that are in the audience, you're released to the football game. I'm going to hurry home and watch that. Tomorrow night, council's live streamed. I think it's not your civic responsibility exactly, but it's probably more entertaining than what will be on regular TV. So tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Tune in if you have an opportunity. If not, pick it up on the, in the recurring YouTube or recorded method. So anyway, enough said. Nice to be back with you, and appreciate the questions. We'll follow up on both the stormwater and this Pounder Avenue. Both stormwater issues. Imagine that. It rains 3 inches, and every stormwater concern, moves to the forefront of people's minds. So. All right, with that said, I appreciate you watching and listening, and we'll see you tomorrow night at the council meeting and next Monday night.